In a fishing village on the Okinawan coast, there is a woman who has not purchased a single facial cleanser in 43 years. She is 71 years old. Her skin does not look 71 by any standard you have been taught to apply. That is the part that stops people. Not that she uses something exotic or expensive or found only inside a laboratory, but that what she uses costs almost nothing, takes less than 2 minutes, and has never once required a label she could not read out loud. What she does every morning and has done since her mother showed her, and her mother's mother showed her mother, is wash her face in a way that the modern beauty industry has no financial reason to ever show you. Not because it is secret, because it is free, because once you understand it, you stop buying. And the entire architecture of a multi-billion-dollar market depends on you never quite stopping. That is what this channel exists to document. Not trends, not routines, someone assembled from a mood board. Real practices, still alive, from communities of women who age in ways that do not match what we have been told aging looks like. If you have spent money on cleansers, toners, and creams that promised results and delivered frustration, this is the conversation that was missing. The practices described here come from the daily lives of women in Okinawa Prefecture, the traditional districts of Kyoto, and the rural communities of Nagano, places where these methods have never been replaced by anything modern, because nothing modern has proven worth the trade. Let us begin with the act itself, the wash, because what Japanese women in these communities do is not what you have been trained to do, and the difference is not subtle. The first thing to understand is temperature. In Okinawa and in the mountain communities of Nagano, cold water or water barely warmed above cold is the standard for the final rinse, not the whole wash. The final rinse, this is not discomfort for its own sake. The cold water causes a brief contraction of surface capillaries. Circulation is stimulated. The skin tone becomes temporarily more even and the pores close on their own, not because a product has chemically forced them, but because the body has done what it was built to do. This costs nothing. It requires nothing. It is simply knowing what the body knows. The second thing is pressure, or more precisely, the absence of it. Women in these communities do not scrub. They press. The hands are cupped, the water is brought to the face, and the contact is almost weightless. The skin around the eyes and mouth, where lines arrive first, is never dragged. This sounds small. Over 40 years, it is not small. The mechanical stress of daily scrubbing, multiplied across decades, contributes measurably to the loss of skin elasticity. The women in these villages do not have a word for this in the clinical sense. They have something better. They have the habit passed down correctly, which is worth more than any word. The third element is what replaces the cleanser. Here is the number that changes everything. The average American woman uses a facial cleanser with a pH between 9 and 11. The skin's natural surface, what dermatologists call the acid mantle, has a pH of between 4.5 and 5.5. Every time a high pH cleanser is applied, it strips not just oil and makeup, but the protective acidic film the skin produces to defend itself. That film takes hours to rebuild. During those hours, the skin is exposed, reactive, and here is the part the packaging does not mention more, dependent on whatever moisturizer you apply next. That dependency is not incidental. It is structural. It was engineered. The rice water preparation used in these communities has a pH naturally close to 5. Some preparations of fermented rice water allowed to sit for 24 to 48 hours drift toward 4.5. This is not an accident of folk tradition. It is a functional alignment with the skin's own chemistry, arrived at through generations of observation long before anyone owned a pH meter. Fermented rice bran called nuka has been part of Japanese skincare and bathing culture since the Edo period, which is to say since the 17th century. Geisha in Kyoto's Gion district used it. Farmers' wives in Nagano used it. Women working in the heat of Okinawan summers used it. 3 entirely different climates, 3 entirely different lifestyles, 1 convergent practice. That kind of convergence does not happen by coincidence. Now, let us be precise about what rice water actually contains. because this is not magic and should not be sold as magic. Rice water, the water left after rinsing or soaking uncooked rice, contains inositol, a carbohydrate compound that has been studied for its ability to penetrate the hair shaft and the outer layer of skin and reduce surface friction. It contains ferulic acid, a plant-based antioxidant. It contains a small amount of niacin, which you may know as vitamin B3, the same compound that appears in high-end serums sold at considerable cost under the name niacinamide. And it contains amino acids, the structural precursors that the skin uses to maintain its own proteins. None of this is proprietary. None of it can be patented. A rice company cannot hold an exclusive license on rice water. This is relevant because what can be patented synthetic versions, stabilized extracts, novel delivery systems is where the money went. And what cannot be patented was quietly categorized as unscientific, as folklore, as something women in remote villages did before they knew any better. That framing was not neutral, it was strategic. In 1976, the Cosmetic Ingredient Review Panel was established in the United States. This panel was created to evaluate the safety of cosmetic ingredients. It was funded then, as it is funded now, by the Personal Care Products Council, the trade association that represents the cosmetics and personal care industry. The panel reviews ingredients and makes recommendations. It has no enforcement power. Its recommendations are not binding, and in its entire operational history, it has reviewed over 4,000 ingredients, a process that sounds comprehensive until you understand that the industry introduces new compounds continuously, that the review process can take years, and that a product reaches consumers long before any independent assessment is complete. This is the system that stands between your skin and everything that goes on it. The FDA did not substantially update its framework for cosmetics regulation between 1938 and 2022. 84 years, 2 world wars, the moon landing, the internet, gene sequencing, and the regulatory document governing what goes on American women's faces was essentially untouched. The industry self-reported. The industry self-reviewed, and American women spent, in 2023 alone, approximately $62 billion on skincare, much of it on products promising to restore what the previous round of products had quietly damaged. That is the record, not a feeling. A record. There is a retired nurse in Nagano Prefecture, 68 years old, with 3 children and 4 grandchildren, who has washed her face with rice water and cold spring water every morning for 31 years. She spends approximately $2 a month on this practice, because the rice she uses is the same rice she cooks. There is no separate budget, no dedicated shelf in the bathroom. She told a visitor once, in the way that people say things they have never thought to question, that she washed her face the way her mother washed hers, because her mother had beautiful skin until she died, and that had always seemed like sufficient evidence. 31 years, $2 a month. She would not recognize the problem this is supposed to solve, because she never had the problem to begin with. The method itself, the actual practice, is simpler than you have been led to expect. Uncooked white rice, rinsed once to remove surface dust, is then soaked in clean water for 20 to 30 minutes. The water is strained off. This is the base preparation. At room temperature, this water is pressed gently onto the face using cupped hands, allowed to sit for 30 to 60 seconds, and rinsed with cool water. Some women in these communities use it at room temperature. Some warm it slightly in winter. The women in Okinawa sometimes use it at the temperature of the ocean breeze, which is to say, not cold but not warm either. There is variation. There is no single ceremonial recipe. The common thread is what is not in it, which is every synthetic compound, surfactant, fragrance, preservative, and stabilizer that the modern version would require to sit in a pump bottle on a shelf for 18 months. That synthetic fragrance point is worth a pause. In the United States, fragrance can appear as a single word on a cosmetics label. One word. Behind that word, legally and currently, there may be dozens or hundreds of individual chemical compounds, many of them undisclosed, many of them with no long-term safety data for repeated skin contact. The European Union moved to restrict this practice in 2003. American labels have not changed. If you have ever noticed your skin reacting to a product and could not identify why, you may have found your answer in one word on the back of the package. Rice water has no fragrance component. It smells faintly of starch. Some women in Nagano add a small piece of dried yuzu peel to the soaking water, not for skincare chemistry, but because the smell connects the morning practice to something larger, to season, to memory, to the specific cold of a mountain November. That is the human element that no laboratory can replicate and no brand can authentically sell. Japanese women did not originate this instinct towards simple, pH-compatible, fermented preparations. Korean women in the Joseon period used fermented grain water in similar ways. Ayurvedic tradition, going back more than 2,000 years, used rice water for both skin and hair. Roman women in the 1st century used water steeped with oats and grain. Egyptian women used fermented honey preparations with comparable chemistry. The logic appears independently in cultures that had no contact with one another, which tells you something important. It tells you that generations of careful observation, not a controlled trial, but accumulated watching, comparing, correcting, arrived at the same place. Japanese women did not invent these principles. They preserved them without interruption. That is the distinction. And in the face of what the last century of industrial cosmetics has done to the average American woman's understanding of her own skin, preservation turns out to be the radical act. The modern beauty industry has worked very hard to make you believe that your skin is a problem requiring constant expert intervention, that it cannot be trusted to function without synthetic rescue, that what worked for your grandmother was charming but primitive, that the real solution is always around the corner, always slightly more expensive, always requiring the next purchase. The women in these communities did not receive that message, or they received it and did not believe it. Either way, they kept washing their faces the same way, and they kept aging the way they aged. If you have read the ingredient lists, if you have bought the serums and felt nothing change, if you have suspected without quite being able to say why that something real was being withheld so that something profitable could be sold in its place, then you already know what this channel is for. The women watching this channel are not the women who need to be told what to buy. They are the women who have started to ask why. Have you ever tried washing your face with rice water, or did someone in your family use something similarly simple that you later replaced with something from a store? Leave it in the comments and tell me where you grew up. I want to know where this knowledge still lived. And if you had a grandmother or a mother with remarkable skin and you only recently started wondering what she actually did, that question is worth sitting with. If you are the kind of woman who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. In the next video, there is a specific practice used in the geisha districts of Kyoto that was formally documented by a Japanese cosmetics company in 1967, and then quietly buried when the company calculated that it could not be monetized. The document exists. The practice is still in use, and the ingredient at the center of it has been sitting in your kitchen the whole time.